Nick DeMeuse. I'm part of the Google Maps platform. For those that aren't familiar, we are part of Google Maps that uses the technology to enable various customers to use our data, our technology to optimize their businesses. So specifically focus on transportation logistics, get to work with great companies like Butter Trucks to drive more efficiencies, provide better user experiences for their drivers and consumers ultimately.
Awesome. And this is Better Yet. So launched last January as a podcast. We've been lucky enough to have 15 kind of brilliant and innovative minds join us now over about 18 months. Jason Murray of Shipium joined us last summer. We just had an incredible session between Andy and Craig Fuller, the CEO of FreightWaves. And gentlemen, you're the guinea pig. This is the first live Better Yet that we're doing here today. So let's dive in. Nick, I'm going to give you this first question. Again, we're talking about this reimagined parcel journey. It's not just last mile. It's kind of end to end. So from your purview at Google, you have a very unique purview into kind of the intersection of technology and logistics. First, middle, or last mile, where's your team at Google seeing the greatest level of investment in innovation?
All right. I'm going to cheat and pick two,
because
it's much easier to do that. I've been really excited, though, in the last mile space. Maybe obvious here, but I find it so interesting to see companies like Butter Trucks try to bring more predictability, where ultimately your package will arrive before 8 p.m. is unfortunately still too much the norm. Had a customer, a year or so ago talk about why they could get visibility on their cheeseburger to the doorstep, but couldn't get that for their iPhone. And really, that's where I see so much opportunity. I think it's also the place where for us, the driver is a key persona that we focus on, and it's where the driver has to interact with the real world in so many ways. And being able to reflect what the driver is experiencing to ultimately try to bring plan and execution closer together is where I see so much opportunity and so many companies trying to make progress in that space. So that's where I'm seeing a lot of interesting work. Middle mile also a ton of big jumps with autonomy. I still, once again, with the driver and how to enable people with tools, we've spent a lot of time working with long-haul drivers and understanding what their experience looks like, and they're sitting there with 4 different apps, Google Maps to understand what traffic's going to look like, another app to get truck routing, maybe their carrier app as well, and it ultimately, it's really kind of painful there. And so by bringing them better tools, by bringing better routing into the middle mile space, the thing that Google has been starting to work on, we see so much opportunity to drive more efficiencies, not only for drivers, but also for the facilities where they're trying to go. So ultimately a lot there kind of across the chain.
Absolutely. We've been talking a lot about route optimization. Let's dive into that a little bit. It was so much of a big innovation when Google introduced a few years ago, even the red, yellow, green status rating in our traffic, and now you read where we're going with generative AI and the ability to literally incorporate not only availability of parking spots or number of crosswalks or the frequency of or the concentration of pedestrians in a given area. Talk to us maybe about just the nuance that is going to start to happen in the route optimization that's not only going to lead to smarter routes, but cleaner routes, and ultimately better for both the shipper and the recipient.
Yeah, I think one of the key aspects, there's kind of 2 parts of the route optimization problem that I often see. One is just how to reflect, again, the real world that the driver is experiencing, so it's the map behind it. It's how to reflect all the constraints that you as a fleet operator want to reflect. But then again, it's getting this in the hands of a driver. How is this something that the driver is going to follow is what I see as so key. And so one of the things that we've been seeing some interesting opportunities around is explainability of routes. So why was this stop before that stop? This can help a driver. This can also help an operator, a data analyst, things like that, understand ultimately how to get better over time, which is really the key behind a lot of this stuff. Yeah. And so I think from a pure kind of Gen AI perspective, there's a lot of work there. There's also just kind of more traditional AI tools that I like, reinforcement learning to get better over time, that there's a lot of opportunity in as well.
Yeah. Andy, you dove headfirst into this industry 6 years ago.
Yep.
It's not easy to shift long-held paradigms of 30 and 40 years. What has been an overarching philosophy or guiding belief that you have at Better Trucks to say we can do better in this area, we can drive innovation in very tightly held legacy industries?
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, we've always had this philosophy that technology drives quality. We aligned with Google even before, some of these more recent GFE options were available. But we aligned, our company from the start, built on top of Google Cloud, because we felt that it was the best stack out there to build a modern delivery system. And then as they've kind of opened up some more and more of these APIs, it's allowed us to our fleets of drivers and that driver experience, we built it in a way that really ensures quality at the door. So, it starts kind of, we have an adage like you win through your drivers, right? And so a lot of that has to do with their day-to-day experience. The drivers are a finicky bunch, so the more you can do to build a great experience for them, and that means the app in the palm of their hand leading their day, but then also teeing up that day the night before with all the route optimization that we can do as well. But again, partnering with Google on this and all the amazing APIs and technology they have available makes it a little bit easier for us to do our job, which is to make sure that the customer experience is great. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Let's bounce over to bad address data. So bad address data, this question's for both of you. Andy, I'll start with you, your POV. Who's at fault when an address is wrong? Is the customer, me, at fault? Is the shipper's tech stack at fault? Is the carrier's tech stack at fault, or the tech itself?
Well, the customer's always right. So
Okay.
it just depends on which customer you're talking about. So there's there's the buyer that that ordered the package, and there's the shipper that's sending the data. So we always work through that. It is definitely something that is kind of a bane of the existence of a lot of the industry. But making sure your data is clean coming in, making sure that you're leveraging all the platform integrations in the best possible way. I mean, it's why we partner with GMT. It's why we partner with ShipEM. It's why we partner with a lot of these companies to verify that address data is good. But yeah, it definitely slows down on the driver's side. Reattempts is a main cause of excess cost in the industry. So anything you can do on the inside, on the way in. But love to hear Nick's perspective, kind of offering some of the APIs available to shippers. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I think the address problem is super interesting. I'll start by saying as well, as challenging as we sometimes find the address problem in the US, try it in India. Where it's literally, I'm the house with the red door next to the bus stop is the definition of where something needs to get dropped off. And so I think as we look internationally especially, there's so much complexity to it. But I think, for us, we try to provide the tools, whether it's a shipper or whether it's the carrier, to ultimately, provide a good user experience is number one. So going back to the customer or consumer's never wrong, yes, they could enter in something wrong, but most of the time you need to have better data or a better experience to try to enable them to do as good as possible. But then it flows through, and obviously a company like Andy's is not going to, has to deal with bad addresses. That's part of life. And so we've tried to work really hard, not only to provide the initial tools on how to parse addresses and understand what's really being reflected there, but also to understand how to create the best feedback loops so that ultimately, again, over time, we can get things better. And so utilizing drivers, for instance, is a way to learn, like, okay, this address was bad, it should be over here instead. And so we have internally kind of our mantra is each trip makes the next trip better. And so I think that's really kind of the mentality of how over time to make sure that you can optimize as much as possible for the address data that you have coming in.
Sure.
Yeah, and if you want to go like super technical on it, our customers that are on the Google stack as well, so like big retailers that have already kind of aligned with Google, you don't have to, but if you are, you can actually pass us back place IDs, which is a specific kind of like a Google GPS location, if you will, and we can use that in our mapping, and so it actually like It's verified on the front end that the address has already been validated by Google on the purchase side, and then that can be passed into our system, and it provides for a cleaner experience and better transparency. So like for us, like that's super valuable, and we see that it also saves on costs for the shipper as well.
Awesome, Andy. I'm curious, Nick, are you seeing, the last trip makes the next trip better? Are you seeing iterative improvements in the technology, or the language or the large language models just getting smarter? Or are you fundamentally able to start to rethink some of these problems, either with new technologies or different technologies, or just better problem-solving techniques?
I think there's, even very traditional, like use every tool in the way that can be used. And so some of it is just enabling a driver to report something. There's nothing, beyond a good user experience there that really needs to be delivered. And actually that is part of what we want to enable is, we don't want a driver to have to take 10 seconds even out of their data to report something that's bad. It's how can you get it in 2 seconds, 1 second even. And so some of it isn't even, large language models or anything like that. A good chunk of it is, though, how do you create feedback loops in all your products to make them better? And I think certainly at Google's scale, that kind of has to be part of what you're building out. But I think even, for a company like Andy's, that has to be part of it. And so it's really just making sure that in anywhere in your tech stack possible that you have some reinforcement happening there.
Awesome.
If you don't mind,
Please.
I'll add every one of our deliveries is an opportunity for a driver to identify where that door actually is, right? So we know what the address was supposed to be on the way in, and then we know the exact precise location where they have completed the delivery. So if you can imagine like a heat map of all the deliveries that have happened at that location, we're constantly taking that data and verifying and kind of feeding that back into the machine to verify that that address is valid. It's very helpful in a multi-unit dwelling or a large suburban complex that might be the address might be here, but the actual delivery expectation is here. And so we're using that all the time, and we're able to kind of use the wisdom of the crowd of all of our customers and all of our, the attempts at specific addresses. But again, it kind of feeds back into that loop, and we work with Google on that as well. So.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to ask for a hot take from both of you, and I'm going to make you give me an answer on this over/under. So real-time pricing is becoming more pervasive in our lives. Everything from that Uber that I took was real-time price to, I don't personally gamble, but friends that I know do. You can place real-time bets in line. Enormous amounts of computations are happening, whether we realize it or not, in so many things in our lives. So Andy, I'll start with you. Over/under 2028, does real-time pricing in the parcel industry become standard?
I mean, I'd like to say under, but none of us want the Wendy's-like experience. I mean, didn't Wendy's come out with like real-time pricing for Whopper or whatever it was, and everyone like freaked out? So I don't think we want the Wendy's experience. I think but also at the same time, FedEx and UPS continue to add, these surcharges into core major markets. It's kind of the inverse DAS fee. So people have always been looking at, kind of different types of pricing structures. I'm a big believer in real-time pricing or dynamic pricing. We see that with a number of our kind of cutting-edge customers. And with tools like Shipium and with partners like GMT that are able to audit it and verify that the pricing is correct, we see it a big value for our customers that are able to leverage when we're under capacity or have excess capacity for them to leverage lower prices. We think it's the way the market's going to go, but you need a lot of technology tools to enable it, and you need partners that can kind of verify it. So that's why we've aligned with GMT and companies like Shipium.
So you're saying under. So we're going to come back here.
I'm an optimist.
We're going to come back here.
I'm very much an optimist.
3 years.
Okay.
We've got the tape rolling.
All right, fine. I'll stick with it. Under.
Nick?
I will say I have much less of an opinion on this. I will say over just to be contrarian. I do think it's exciting, though. I mean, I think ultimately the goal The goal is to reflect all of the latest information that you have. I see as like really what you're trying to do there. And so if there's opportunity to use the latest information on here are all the rest of the deliveries that we need to do in a day, and that's how our cost structure for this additive thing is gonna change things, I think that's fantastic. Like it's like there's more efficiencies to be gained there. I know there's a lot of kind of structural challenges in a lot of industries that that can prevent that. So I don't know, both excited about it, but also we'll I guess leave it to companies like yours to make that happen.
Trying.
Yeah.
Often the technology is not the biggest barrier in this instance, and I'm guessing it's not here as well. I guess, Andy, from your perspective, what do you think will be the biggest barrier if that is to become a reality?
Yeah, I mean, customer adoption, willingness to attempt new things, status quo, just general inertia of the industry. It's always that's what you're faced up against. Yeah, I mean, the math and the, airlines have been doing it for years, so we think we can do it. But yeah, you always get, it's the consistent innovation problems in large organizations. So you got to help push, demonstrate the value, make sure they understand how much money they could be saving by leveraging things like dynamic pricing, and then deliver on it.
Awesome. Okay, zone skipping. Andy, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to you, Nick. Do we talk too much, just the right amount, or too little about this concept in the parcel industry?
We are, a relatively new carrier, been around for 6 years. Definitely, riding the wave of the multi-carrier movement. So a lot of customers out there are looking for alternatives. They're looking at multiple carriers. There's a number of them here today that are all providing great services for their customers. And a lot of times it's the decision for a large buyer or a buyer of a large brand is the juice worth the squeeze when we're partnering with one of these smaller alternative carriers. And so what we always make sure of is, how do we enable a zone skip or leverage a longer middle mile movement, or what types of things can we help you with to kind of get more product into a market and leverage some economies with either your existing parcel spend or expected parcel spend with some of the national carriers, and how do you combine that with other alternative carriers like those that are here today. So I'm a big believer in it. It's really helped a lot of our customers grow. We partner very well with the national carriers, even though we're competing with them. And I think that if you work closely with with carriers like us, you'll be able to find value there.
Nick, do you have a perspective?
I would say more options ultimately on the table for customers, going to be a better thing. I think the specifics of it probably not as much.
I think the net is if you are zone skipping just as the logistical journeys, it just requires more orchestration, right? More coordination, more technology to make that smoothly. Anytime we're always trying to reduce complexities. So as that does introduce complexities, but it has to have that technology stack kind of working top to bottom though. Correct?
Yeah, and you mentioned transparency, right? So that visibility on those movements has to also be there. So whether that's at the container level, the pallet level, Gaylord level, or the parcel level, that visibility needs to be there in order for them to take advantage of a zone skip, whether it's on, into our network or, alongside of our network, with one of our partners.
Awesome. A couple more as we drill down to innovation. I'm always amazed, and I love to talk to individuals who have been in this industry for 15, 20 years, just the amount of change, especially over the last 5 or 6 that have taken place. We've introduced so much technology into the process, from multi-carrier platforms to RPA, parcel auditing, transportation management systems, route optimization, and a whole lot more. And it's only going to continue to accelerate, right? So, Andy, I'm just curious, as you think of, and you've had a unique perspective in the industry, what technology or piece of the tech stack do you feel like has had the biggest impact, A? And then where do you feel like, despite the introduction of all that technology in our space, we still have some gaps?
Yeah, so I started my career at FedEx in Colliersville in the technology center there back in the year 2000. So early days of FedEx. Fell in love with the industry. Also worked in FedEx warehouses as a kid. So I've always loved it. I'm a little bit sad being in Nashville this week instead of Memphis again. I think having seen kind of the evolution of the journey, over the past 20 years, the transparency that's available, the technology that's available is, if customers are not taking advantage of it, kind of shame on them. But I think, just the expected quality at the cost point that these large shippers are seeing is enabled by technology. So it's giving them the visibility and the expected quality that they, didn't have those options of 15 years ago. So, from my perspective, partnering with Google, I have, our company has the ability to kind of push the envelope for our customers, drive down their price, have them see more value, and maintain that same quality. And that's all really just technology driven. So, where you got, as a buyer, you don't really see it, but our business is able to more efficiently run, whether it's using machine learning to verify quality on the back end with, photos on delivery, whether it's, leveraging large language models for our customer service agencies, so we don't have to build out as huge of a team. It reduces our cost. All those things effectively are able to provide a better value to our customer. And again, it's just kind of the whole tech stack is what we're able to leverage. So,
where do you feel like maybe we still have gaps despite introducing all this technology into this marketplace?
Well, I mean, we talked about this today, but this is really where the rubber meets the road, right? The digital meets the physical. It's people order things online, and this is the physical manifestation of not only your the hard-earned e-com. You made the sale. It's your brand being represented, and it's the actual physical movement. So that is always going to be. There's a lot of friction there when you're dealing with the physical world of warehouses and people in trucks and all the problems. So I mean, there's just more innovation that will happen in that space. But really the physical meets the digital, and we're in the crux of it. So that's my answer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I go back to the driver experience, which is where I see kind of the physical and the digital coming together there, and just giving, again, drivers the tools such that you have predictability on what they're trying to do, so that ultimately you can give a better consumer experience as an end goal there.
I'm curious, I feel like so many times a shipper maybe doesn't see that driver experience. We've talked so much about the importance of it, right? And I know there's a lot of shifts going on. Is that, Andy, are you having conversations with, shippers or as the carrier side? Is that something folks ask about?
Yeah, I mean, it is something that they don't really, it's not exposed to the customer, but the day in the life of the driver, if it's easier, effectively is, it's a better experience for everybody. It also allows us, if it's smoother, to be a lower cost, which ultimately is passed back to the customer. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the APIs that are available via Google that allows us to build an application for our drivers with a map that is embedded in the driver application, it's less context switching for them inside of the application, makes their day smoother. They can get their help on the road faster. They can solve problems quicker, all because of the application is smoother. It just starts from there. You less frustrated drivers, less reattempts, higher quality at the door, and ultimately those all translate into a better experience for the shipper and then the recipient as well.
Absolutely. Nick, are you looking at that at the driver level? I'm just curious. You mentioned upwards of 4 different apps, and again, what I'm always struck at is how much this is changing. If you look at that driver experience even 3 years ago, probably has fewer apps. So are you looking at what does that look like? How do we make that better? How do we maybe combine? How do we reimagine a user interface? Are you looking at all that?
Yeah, I think it's our Google Maps team, platform team, also broader Google Maps team, kind of constantly looking at how to bring more real-time awareness ultimately to a driver is a big part of it. So knowing if road conditions are changing, how to how to reroute around that, for instance, how to give more guidance on where to get to an entrance, things like that. There's still so much that, if you're from a logistics standpoint, if you're a new driver getting very comfortable, also if you're, from an operations standpoint, allowing drivers to go into more areas they're unfamiliar with ultimately gives more flexibility in terms of how you assign things. So we pay a lot of attention to that. A big part of what I end up doing is kind of on the ground user studies with drivers to ultimately figure out how we can add more value for them.
The word that comes to mind when you talk about that is anticipatory, right? So if we can serve up that information at 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. that there is that road closure, or as I was driving to Midway yesterday, side streets blocked with gosh knows who 6 Chicago police departments, that's, an extra 10 minutes on my end. We had to back up, we had to go around, right? If we could start to feed that real-time information into the system, you add that up over, gosh, how many drivers, how many parcels, it makes a huge difference, right?
Yeah, it's reacting as quickly as something happens. So the latency of getting that information out to users is super important. I have also found that it's super important to understand when things are over with. You don't want to route someone around an issue that is no longer there. And so it's kind of the entire life cycle of things that ends up being important to provide that visibility as soon as you can.
Awesome. We got 2 more and then we're going to take questions. I'm going to talk about generative AI. I mean, it is mind-boggling for me, even from like someone who's interested in this and curious in this, just the pace at which we're changing. I'm on X, almost daily, and you're seeing these threads with 42 new applications of some of the generative AI models and what it can produce, and it is mind-blowing. So I'm curious, I'll start with you, Nick, as you kind of look at this and are at the forefront, where do you see some of the biggest impacts of generative AI and logistics and parcels over the next 6 to 9 months? I see you smiling.
Well, I think within all of Google, I'm probably somewhere around like 56,000th most qualified to talk about generative AI. But I, see so many interesting things that are coming out of our cloud organization. I mean, a lot of it are kind of cross-industry type of use cases that are just especially applicable here, whether it's, from a contracting standpoint, being able to easily understand whether you're meeting compliance needs or whether SLAs are being met. There's customer support, obviously, is a big use case for Gen AI, and being able to, I think what's especially interesting in the parcel space is bringing in all of that data to be able to, really get to a user what the latest state of things for them are. I also think, I find it so interesting to see within an organization how can information be easily shared across users. And so I think for a lot of companies, that's going to be such a critical part of where Gen AI can add value. So, as a supply chain professional, for instance, being able to get the kind of tools at your fingertips. If a truck breaks down, how do you handle those types of scenarios? Or demand forecasting, things like that. There's so many great, I think, interfaces that are going to come out that allow regular users to just do their job that much better.
Awesome. Andy, you're on the recipients of these technologies and tasked with kind of bringing them to life and, rubber meets the road, implementing them as well. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, so I mentioned we aligned with Google, right when we started 6 years ago, and it was kind of for the main ML work, the machine learning. So, it's very important in our business, the reinforcement of the addresses, the reinforcements of the photos on delivery, verifying quality. We have to make sure that our drivers are doing their job. The best way you can do that at scale is, kind of putting them through these machine learning models to verify all the quality has been achieved for the day. So that's been kind of table stakes for the past 6 years. Now, the more modern or the most recent things with the large language models, what we're seeing is just general astronomical increase in efficiency for our technical teams. So our progress of development has just skyrocketed over the past 9 months as our Copilot is rolled out. I mean, it's kind of at a low level, but the the ability for our engineers to code that much faster, the innovations in customer service, just ability for us to scale and provide a better service experience. And then one kind of specific thing for us is, in the warehousing space and in the driver space, driver turnover, warehousing associate turnover is always something that we're focused on. And so we've been using large language models a lot for training, so building real-time training for activities either under the roof or on the road. And so those are things that, again, don't directly impact the customer, but ultimately drives a better business for us, and we can, that value is kind of passed back to the customer.
Awesome. I want to finish up here. Both of you lead large teams, large technology teams. We started out this morning talking about a culture of innovation. I want to talk about how you build and foster a culture of innovation. It's very easy to see here and say, oh, let's do it, but innovation also introduces change into teams and organizations, and change introduces uncertainty, and we all know that uncertainty is not good for organizations, especially fast-growing ones. So how do you as a leader push your teams, challenge your teams, introduce that uncertainty, but maintain some of those psychological safety nets that allow people to take risks and push the envelope? Andy?
I would love to hear Nick's perspective first. I'll defer to him because I know he's got some.
I think so Google has a lot of, perspectives built out around innovation, and I think two that resonate most strongly with me are the focus on the user. I think by the focus on the user allows you to have a shared sense of what matters and allows you to kind of throw away all the baggage that you might otherwise have as an organization. And so I think that is probably the most critical thing from
everyone says focus on the user, but how does that show up? Does that show up in how people spend their time? Does that show up in, to your point, ride-alongs?
It's ride-alongs. It's when you're brainstorming and trying to. I was having a conversation just yesterday where the current tech stack started to come in, and it's well, no, we don't want to describe things from the standpoint of our current tech stack. We want to describe things from the standpoint of what our user is going to experience. And so even when we're providing developer tools and APIs to companies like Andy's, part of it is okay, how are we going to describe or design our product in a way that's going to resonate with how his team thinks about things. So it kind of has to just infiltrate across things. Even when you're setting expectations, there can be such a tendency to look at launching things or kind of trailing metrics towards what is your impact on the user. And we try to always have metrics that are really around what is the user impact that we want to have as a key element there.
Awesome.
And so what I would add is, the bias for action is super important for us. So our, kind of philosophy, this industry, delivery, you guys have been in this industry forever as well, and it's not always pretty. There's always problems. Things happen every day or worse. And but what we find is, working closely with our customers, if we have a bias for action to solve problems, to react in an appropriate way, timely manner, and kind of push forward, no one is ever going to be faulted in our team if they have a bias for action, and that's we find that that's really working with customers. Our customers seem to very much value that because we're very responsive and kind of pushing forward to solve problems. So that's mine.
Amazing.
Yeah. I guess just to build on that, I think there's big innovation and then there's little innovation that happens every day, and it's important to celebrate and do well there. And so I think for me, a big part of it is making sure on a regular basis you're just building out habits as a team to think about how do you brainstorm around small problems such that when big ones start to come up, you've actually kind of built out that safe space as you described.